Howdy, I am back working on my buggy and wanted to make a video about kind of building the control arms and kind of a simple way to build fixtures to do them. This is just kind of general fabrication as well as a little bit more specific to this particular one, but I'm not going to give any actual measurements on it, but just kind of an idea of kind of the mindset you need to be in to make this kind of stuff. It doesn't take something complicated to make, and if you're duplicating something, it's actually easier than starting from scratch. I had to make these off of measurements, but what you need to understand is basically the critical stuff is any attachment points. Kind of the stuff in between isn't that important, but like your pivots for your control arms in relation to your ball joint, or this has a heim on the end, but that's your critical dimensions like on this control arm. This one's going to have a shock mount on the bottom side, which can be located without the jig side of it. You could probably modify the jig to attach the shock mount. Once I get a shock mount welded to it, I could probably modify my jig so that down the road, if I built another set, I could have the shock mount already located. But again, for this one, my critical dimensions were control arm, pivots, and the heim location. Same with these. Control arms, pivots, and the heims. So the plans give you the measurements for all the locations of that stuff. So you kind of just need to figure out a way to make a fixture to get them located, and then you build the control arm to them. So what I did on this particular case was I made some spacers that go inside the control arms, bushings, and another spacer that is that exact width. And then that fits inside there. And on the other control arm, I just made a longer sleeve, because there's two different control arm bushing widths on this. There's a narrow and a wide, basically, and so that one will fit in there. It does the same thing. It goes inside the bushing and fits inside that. And what that does is lets you get your control arm bushing, and just kind of demo this here real quick. And if you can kind of picture the sleeve on that locates the end of your control arm. So then on the other end, you've got depending on the control arm, see the rear control arms are the same width and they use the same bushings, but the ends are different. So you need a way to attach the cup to the end, and then get your pivots, and then you build the rest to fit. And on this one, I modified the jig for the second control arm to my third attachment point for it, for instance. Take this out real quick. It's right here. So that would bolt on. Then these go in here. Then you've got your 3 points attached. Then you've got just weld your bars in there, weld your crossbar, and that one's done. This one was a little bit more complex. It goes in there like that. These bars are on here to hold the long horizontal bars on the center line of the cup and the bushing. So you can get as elaborate or keep it as simple as you want, but that's the basic idea, is to get those 3 points in space located solidly and then weld to them. This stuff does move when you weld, so I would recommend just tacking everything together and then leave your control arm mounts tacked, weld everything else, then put it back on the jig, make sure everything still lines up, and then weld them solid. In order to line these up, you just take a piece of all thread and run through all your tabs, and then everything will be in line. It's kind of like these all threads got bent a little bit, but as you can see, I make sure everything is on a consistent center line there. But like I said, in order to do it for this edge thing, this buggy, you're going to need 2 jigs and the ability to make 3 different control arms. But once you get done, you know, if you're going to build another one, you've already got the fixtures, and it'll make the job a lot easier. But if you have an existing control arm that you're trying to duplicate, it's a lot easier, because like you could take those control arms there and just bolt this stuff to it and then weld a jig around that instead of having to locate the stuff in space. But like on this one, I made it where you can remove the deal for the second control arm, so it's not in the way if you're building the other design. But I think that's the gist of what I wanted to get across. Like I said, you just kind of need to think in a way of just, what are my attachment points, you know, what's critical, get everything in line, and then just fit your bars up and start connecting the dots, if that makes sense. They don't have to be elaborate to get the job done, but if you tried to build these just on the bench, you would never get them straight or consistent. I mean, you could get it done, but it just would not be near the level it needs to be satisfactory. So another thing you could do, like down here, instead of making these sleeves, and this ended up a little bit overcomplicated, but you could just make kind of a thick washer with a step in it that fits the bushing, what I would call like a top hat, that would just snap on the outside, and then that would just require moving your tabs to fit the new width instead. But the way I did this, it worked out fine for me, and they're simple jigs, and if I build another one of these, the jigs are made and it'll be a snap. I have more time in the jigs than I do in the control arms. I probably have an hour in each control arm, if that. This last set, I don't even have an hour probably in the pair, but these took a minute. There's a lot of bars on those to get fit up, and that takes a little bit. But so just be cognizant of the fact that stuff's going to move once you weld it, and you know, keep your attachment points tacked until you've got the bulk of your welding done, and then weld them solid once you know everything's still in line. Because when you take it off the jig, once everything's welded and you put it back on the jig, everything still needs to line up. So, but anyways, haven't got a lot done. I'm kind of waiting on some stuff to come in from Edge, and other than that, I did get all my Heims ordered and whatnot for the control arms. But anyways, just wanted to pass out a little tidbit of information along. I may try to make some other videos about fixtures and jigs and stuff like that. And they're kind of a necessary part of this kind of stuff to do a good job and be consistent and repeatable and stuff. You have to figure out ways to think outside the box sometimes. And like on these, you can make them, you know, if you had a really complex part, you can make pieces that bolt to this. You know, you may have to add a piece and then weld onto your, let's say it's a control arm, weld some brackets onto your control arm, and then add on some other stuff. And then when you get ready to take the arm off, you may have to take some pieces off your jig and then take them off the arm, or vice versa. And so you just gotta do what you gotta do. But once you get the jig made, the hard part's over, and so down the road, it's the work's done, and then it starts getting easier to duplicate. Making one of anything is always what takes all the time. Making 10 of them doesn't take that much more. So